Gabriel. Gabriel from the Caribbean, sounds exotic, wants to talk about his reasons for believing in God and wants to see if me or Katie think that they're logical. Go ahead and give us your reasons, and then I'm interested in hearing Katie's perspective first.
Hey, good afternoon to one and all.
Hi.
Okay, hey. For example, say you see, just getting straight into it, say you are on the road and you see a baby crawl from around the corner, dumpster, or whatever. Your first notion, are you going to assume that the baby materialized behind the dumpster, or it just appeared, or would you assume that it had parents and it was misplaced? I need to see first how you, I guess, see things.
So it sounds like you're potentially going to do the argument from the design, but I will play along for now.
No.
If I saw a baby, I would assume that that baby was born from a pairing of humans, because that's what every single baby that we've ever encountered in history has done. So every single baby I've ever seen in my life has come from, it's been born. So if I saw another random baby, that is what I would assume. Do you think that seems reasonable?
Yes, and all evidence and I guess scientific tests or whatever are done prove that that's where babies come from. So, all right, say that we are going back further now and further.
Well, hold on. So you don't have to do that. Like this is based on what we know. It's an implicit empirical basis, right? So we have this implicit basis because we've experienced it, we've seen it, we've witnessed it. Some of us have
got born myself, right? Actually.
Right.
Yeah, right. Some of us have been born, believe it or not. And that's not a slight to you, just a joke.
But you have no recollection of it, though.
Yeah, but so you don't. There's no like, you know.
Yeah, but I'm saying I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you or anything. I'm not.
No, I know you're not disagreeing, but I'm just saying what Katie's saying is that it just starts with the experiencing and actually being able to compare, you know, that thing to, like, for example, if I like had a bag of Skittles or something and I poured it out, it was like M&Ms or something, right? Like I wouldn't be justified in assuming after some Skittles came out that M&Ms would, because I just don't have the implicit basis. But it could be the case, right? That's really only the argument.
Yeah, it could be. So to do your, it could be the case thing. Like maybe in 500 years' time, we'll find a way of making a baby in like some machine, and then the first baby that we make in the machine, someone might walk in and they might see a baby and they'll be like, "Ah, that baby was born because every single baby that I've ever experienced, I know was born." And then you might be like, "Actually, this one wasn't born. This one was created, and it's different." And now you have a new piece of information, and you now know that babies can come from two different places, and that will change your worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you'll be able to tell the difference between them, maybe not, who knows. But for now, until we have our baby making machine, every single baby we've ever encountered has been born. So that is why I would go to that assumption. And like you were saying, we could do tests on it, but I mean, we can't test. We don't test babies to see if they were born. Like that isn't actually science that we would do, because it's a piece of information that we just know from, you know, the life and looking at things. But anyway, sorry. I think you can carry on from there. I think you're agreeing with those claims.
Yeah. Right. So, in my view of things, I understand that most belief systems have presuppositions. But to me, I think it's wrong for people to, for the information that you just gave me. I think it's wrong for persons to presuppose, for example, abiogenesis. You just told me that if you saw a baby, we, because of what we know, would assume that it had parents.
Well, I wouldn't assume that a baby had just abiogenesis, or whatever the past tense of that word is. But if I saw like a single RNA or something in some kind of primordial soup scenario, I wouldn't assume that it had been born. But these are different. These are different things, aren't they? When I'm looking at babies, it's in the context of human society where, you know, we have babies all the time. There's a baby born every second.
Yeah, you understand. But no, from the time you state RNA in a primordial soup, you're presupposing, you're assuming conditions. But
well, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an example. But what I'm saying is that you're not, you can't just extrapolate that back and say, therefore, you know, abiogenesis didn't work, because I know from our understanding of evolution, which has loads and loads of different pieces of evidence for, I know that some point back, you know, keep going back, the parents, there's a point where the ancestors aren't human anymore. So some, you know, early human babies, it's obviously it's a gray area and it slowly changes over time. But if we go back like, you know, 10 million years along my genetic tree, the parents there aren't human. And at some point they are, and at some point it's a gray area in between. So, you know, we're not, when we're saying, oh, I'm seeing a baby today, for sure, you know, in our sort of time scale, in our lifetimes, every single baby born is going to be a human baby. But over the case of millions and millions of years, humans might evolve and change, and we might get to the point where a human today, and then a million years down the tree, will be a different animal. And it's the same with going back. So if I see a human baby, I do say, oh, that's probably come from a human, because that's how I know reproduction works. But if I see a human baby, I don't say, oh, that's come from 1 trillion years back or whatever of humans. I know that it's come from a human, which has come from a human, blah, 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 a million times. And that came from some
let me
humanoid, like, you know, creature and so on. And then we get to the point where we go far back enough and we say, well, what were the earliest common forms of life? And that's where we get to this situation where we're like, oh, we have a single-celled organism, and we have something that's like before single-celled organisms, and then we're left with a few things like, oh, well, we know that we needed RNA as like a starting point. That's something that we know was a starting point, and then we just guess the conditions.
But what you just said is nothing that we know.
No, Gabriel. So this is where I was actually going to come in. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry, Mike, I was on rant mode.
No, you're fine. This is where I want to come in, because you had mentioned the things about abiogenesis, and I think it's relevant because you said the word, if you go back on the tape, you said presuppose. That's not the case. And
yeah, I'm not presupposing abiogenesis.
Well, it's not a presupposition, and that's, you know, anything beyond what we have to do in science to start off with. But for you to like go into like the pools, and first off, we have like hyperthermal vents. We have implicit basis on, I believe, what they're called amphiphilic molecules. They're like fatty acids that can spontaneously form into ordered structures. It's a lot of like how it's like how soap works, right? There's not a mysterious part of things that we have to presuppose. It's things that we actually have an implicit basis for, of an empirical basis for us to make the hypotheses, right?
Yeah, it's empirical.
It's not just like, yeah, it's not like you just make this up, right? I mean, it's very similar to like the boundary of a protocell, or micelles or bilayers, right? And we literally have utility in this in things like soap, like things we study beyond. So it's not like just comes out of nowhere, you presuppose it. It's a basis of knowledge at which we apply going forward for future predictions. So there's no presupposition there. That's like the reason why we also wouldn't say a baby.
100%.
Go ahead. Sorry. I want to give you a chance. I apologize. Yeah.
All the information that you're stating about this and that molecule, you are stating minor little facts that people have investigated or found. But to leap from one point to the next, there's so much things that have to be skipped out and put into place that aren't there. That's why they cannot.
So do you have the same skepticism? Do you have the same skepticism, Gabriel? Do you have the same skepticism in things in cosmology, like stellar nucleosynthesis, like the idea that we can have?
I have no idea.
So essentially, like stars fuse elements, right? And so It's called nuclear fission. The fancy word that I like to use is stellar nucleosynthesis, or Big Bang nucleosynthesis. And so essentially, like nuclei can fuse all the way up to iron. Heavier elements other than iron fuse in supernovae or novae. And so we make these predictions, but we don't actually see like I mean, we do, and now in the future with better instruments and technology, obviously, but at times, even when we were coming up with these hypotheses, it wasn't just like coming up with nothing. It was taking these little small bits of data, like you said, they're little small bits, and we add on those and make predictions based upon them. And then we get more information, we get more empirical evidence, and then it grows our epistemology on why we think we should accept this versus that, right? It's all of it down to what we learn is standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like even from what we know from other people. So, or other papers or things that have been published or other empirical data. So I'm not really sure your point, because the reason why I bring up the stellar nucleosynthesis, you're not going to deny that, right? Like you like, or do you deny that? Or do you, like, where does this stop for you? Because it seems that you pick abiogenesis, but then you're like, other things that we would have the almost the exact same issue you would have, you'd probably let that fly. And I'm wondering if you're working backwards, if that's the reason.
No. Sorry, I never even looked into what you just mentioned about the whole special word you just called. They honestly can't repeat it. I never looked into it.
Well, so if a scientist propped that up to you, just was like, hey, there's this thing called stellar nucleosynthesis, and they explained to you what it was, elements up to iron fuse in stars, and we have really good evidence for that based on this. Would you deny it looking at the evidence? Because it seems to me that you would, if you're going to be charitable to your values right now.
Go investigate it.
Okay, so then why do you claim that it's a presupposition for abiogenesis? That's where I'm hung up right now.
Because abiogenesis is what is abiogenesis to you, Jmike?
No, but asking. So I said this to one of the other callers, like asking me a question in return.
Not the best way. To me, it is whatever it is to you. I'm happy to accept your definition of abiogenesis.
Well, yeah. So I want to go off of what you're working on. I don't want to cloud or evade what I'm talking about, because it seems like you just want to prop up. We haven't gone through the rigorous processes in science for abiogenesis, but I can point out other things, like the fact that we know, stars fused elements. Like that sounds so ridiculous to some people, where they'll go, okay, but how do we know that? And then they'll look into it and they go, okay, right. It doesn't seem to be an issue in cosmology. It doesn't seem to be an issue there. And so I don't see why you're picking on abiogenesis. Do you agree
with all scientists, Jmike? Do you agree with all 100% of scientists in the world, Jmike?
Not possible.
No.
They don't all agree with each other.
Not at all. Yeah, they completely disagree.
There's a reason I'm asking. There's a reason I'm asking this. Which ones do you agree with? The larger concept.
I accept the current consensus on science, because it's based upon a very rigorous process of peer reviewing and weeding out the bias that I think the show does a really good job at capitalizing these biases that people have. We all have them, right? But I think some callers call in working backwards on certain things and denying things like abiogenesis and calling it a presupposition when they don't have any expertise in it, right? And so I'm going to go with the people that do have an expertise in it, but not just that, the people that have a consensus, right, where this has been reformulated to the point where there's falsification criterions and things where weed that out.
The persons that research, the scientists that research or do their tests or whatever on abiogenesis, are you saying that these bunch of scientists have all agreed that this abiogenesis has happened? 100%.
No.
This is
no. That's not. Nobody in biochemistry even says that.
I think the important step here is. Sorry, one sec. I think the step here is that
from the beginning.
So I think one of the steps here is we think. I mean, I can't speak for Jmike, but it sounds like we're saying that potentially abiogenesis is the case, but we don't know for sure. We know about evolution because we have so much evidence for it.
Sure.
We don't know for certain with abiogenesis, but it seems like a sensible hypothesis for the stage we're at.
But
But I think,
but you know,
Gabriel, please let Katie finish, because you might be able to respond to the point better.
yeah, so I think the argument usually that goes from here about the like the abiogenesis argument is, you could say, oh, we don't quite have enough evidence for abiogenesis to say that's a scientific fact. That's something that we have a consensus on. But then the answer then is, well, we don't know. Like, it's either abiogenesis, which is like our best hypothesis, or it's another hypothesis which has a lot of evidence, or we don't know. So, I mean, potentially you could say, oh, well, I don't actually trust these scientists because I'm an expert in this and I think they've made a bad assumption here, and therefore I actually think the abiogenesis hypothesis doesn't hold up. But then you would then have to go, well, we've got all this data still. We've just made a bad assumption, but we don't know unless you're putting forward another hypothesis which fits all the data we do have and isn't just, well, something's got to have done it, therefore it was God. Because that would be like an even worse jump than for me to just say abiogenesis is true because we've got some evidence. It's a God of the gaps, isn't it? So
I'm using what I'm saying has nothing at all to do with gaps. The only thing that I was going to state were facts.
Okay.
I asked you initially about the baby, because the whole thing was trying to get across for the longest while. I did not mean to derail the conversation or send it all back to stars. All I'm saying is that, in my view, I have 7.7 billion reasons just of today to show that life, as we know it on Earth,
How many?
7.7. It's just averaging billion. They're talking about persons.
Yeah, I get that. I get the correlation.
All the people alive today have been born from other humans, but that doesn't mean that all humans that have ever existed only have humans in their lineage. That's the point I made earlier.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to where. So I know I derailed that on the abiogenesis thing because you talked about it being a presupposition, and I wanted to point out, like, there's certain things that you will accept absent the expertise, but then in this instance of an absence of expertise, you have an issue with it. It seems because it has to do with the things you believe in. But let's move on from that. What is anything you're saying? How does that get me? Make me a theist, Gabriel. Make me a theist. We got like 20 minutes left on the show, and I'd like to be a theist at the end of it.
Okay. The way I look at it, what I know, what have been proven 7.7 billion times as of today, is that persons come from other persons or life. It does not.
That
doesn't mean it's always true.
Well, let me finish, please. Wait. Finish.
Humans only come from humans, but that doesn't mean that single-celled creatures.
Let me finish.
Okay, go for it.
So, in my view, persons have to come from another person or life. So when but I, in myself, say that the only fact that I have is this. Anything else is a theory by scientists. Anything else is something that they're not 100% sure on. They're saying this, then they're changing.
Okay, hold on. Let's not derail it, because you're going to get me into a different derail of saying now you don't accept cell theory and germ theory, and it's nonsense, right? Going back to the same thing that I went to the stars for, is to show, like, you apply a completely different standard for things that are inconvenient to the beliefs you hold first, as opposed to understanding it and then determining those metaphysical beliefs after the fact, because it should follow the physics, not have your physics try to work around that, right? That doesn't seem. Yeah. But also,
we do know evolution is a fact. Like,
well, and yes, also allele frequencies. Yes, allele frequencies change over time. That is a fact, right? Yeah, when we talk about the theory, we are talking about the mechanism at which that occurs. And so, to not get on that whole tangent, what you're getting into is people come from people. Now, am I safe to assume that you're going to extrapolate that and assume that the part gives evidence towards the whole, and you're going to say that's some reason of evidence of God? Would I be wrong to suggest that's what you're about to say?
Yes. That's what I'm going to say.
Yes, I figured it was. Are you familiar with? So are you familiar with the fact that a chair can have wooden legs, but it doesn't mean the entire chair is made of wood, right? You agree with that?
Yep.
Yep. And if I go into Walmart and I see a group of people and they're all hanging out, having a good time, and they tell me, hey, we're a family, and they prove it to me. And then I go, oh, okay. Every other group of people in Walmart is now a family, right? That doesn't make sense. It's a fallacy called a composition division fallacy. You don't get to infer the whole based upon the part, because if you did that with the chair, you'd be wrong. It might have a plastic seat, might not be entirely made of wood. You know, if you say that, okay, a sheep had a mother, so therefore the whole flock had the same mother, it might not be the case.
See, this is the thing with your way of looking at, I guess, logic and being rational that I don't understand. You can agree with scientists with the consensus that life can originate from, let me say, the rainfall on the rocks for millions of years, and then this primordial soup form.
We don't have a consensus on the mechanism. That's what we're trying to say about that abiogenesis. It's a complete category error for you to pick on that as opposed to something that is the consensus, right? You're just talking over my head. You're trying to use something that's easier for you to make your point by going, okay, well, let me pick on this thing that doesn't have an actual consensus on, and use that against Jmike's point earlier that he said that he does add validity to consensus. Well, yeah, but that's missing the point, because that's not something that has a consensus on.
Pick evolution instead. Do you think evolution is? Do you agree with that?
Wait, hold on, Jmike. Do you accept that abiogenesis is the best? How should I put it? The best theory right now for the diversity of life.
Yes, I accept the RNA world hypothesis specifically, but I don't.
Okay, good. Let me speak to you.
Well, hold on. But at no point do I make that in a claim of certainty, right? Like, you come from a position of certainty. You believe a God exists. You're very certain. You deal with absolutes. That's not my worldview. So, of course, from your perspective, it's going to be kind of hard for you to grasp the atheist perspective, or at least my perspective. I don't want to lump us all together, but because we don't deal, neither does science. We don't deal in absolutes. We don't deal. It's not how at least I deal. So it will be somewhat weird for you to probably recognize the fact that I can accept something based upon the purported evidence, and that can change because it's tenable and because science is provisional. But I don't see problems with that because I'm a fallibilist, which, you know.
Okay. Would you accept that Christ was crucified, was buried, 3 days later, he rose from the dead? His dead body.
No, I would not.
That came back to life.
I'm not convinced of any individual part of that.
I'm not even necessarily convinced Jesus walked the earth. I'm not a mythicist.
Yeah,
I'm not necessarily even convinced.
Let's say anyone, any person that's all died, they rose. Would you accept that? And tell me why you would or wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't. Because I have no implicit empirical basis for people rising from the dead. The same way if you told me that you have a flying leprechaun in your car that's trapped and you want to help me come get it out, I'm not going to accept that claim until you show me the evidence, because it's not my problem.
Okay, so what would this one? Would you believe that all the animals on Earth could fit into Noah's Ark?
I strongly disagree with that. I'm convinced that is impossible for a number of reasons.
Okay. Would you accept that
how many more of these we go? I mean, because we got two of us to concede the point. Will you just move on to the point?
This is the last one. Would you accept that all the planets, the sun, the stars, all the energy and matter will squeeze into a dot smaller than a period on a page? Like smaller than a dot on the end of a page?
I don't know where my position is on that. That's not my position to make. I'm not in that field. Look, I'm done with Q&A time. Do you want to get to the point? Because Gabriel, listen, you called in, and the note is you wanted to give your reasons for believing in God and wanted to know if the hosts think that the reasons are logical. Literally, the reason you gave me is a logical fallacy called a composition division fallacy. So no, I don't think it's logical, because you literally committed a fallacy.
Because I commit a fallacy,
it just answers your question. You called in to see if we thought that his reasons were logical. My opinion is that it's literally illogical.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if you can have a better inference rule than, this chair has 4 legs, so therefore the whole chair is made of wood, or that I looked at 3,000 chairs and they're all made of wood, so every other one's going to be. That's just, to me, very sloppy reasoning, because clearly we can find an example where those inference rules do not follow,
But
where
I
you
think
go,
it's
hey,
not-
the part to the whole doesn't work.
It's not even just the logic. This isn't just even hypothetical. We can just look and know for a fact, because the evolution is a thing that's happened, and not every single one of my ancestors ever has been a human. Like we go back and 5 generations, 10 generations, they're all humans. We go back 500,000 generations and they stop being humans, and that, like, we just know that we know that's true. So we can look at the logical thing here, but we can also just look at the evidence.
Okay, you guys answered my question.
No more Q&A. You just give me the reason, or I'm moving on to one more call, because I'm not wasting time on Q&A. This is like Q&A. It's like National Q&A Day. I'm like over it. I just want to have people present the reasons why they believe in a God.
Yeah. I'm done. You guys answered my question, so I'm done.
All right. Well, Gabriel, sorry for being harsh on it, man, but it's just like, I see why it's frustrating for some other hosts when someone doesn't directly answer questions. I'm guilty of it myself, but there was like several times where questions were asked I don't feel like were being answered, and then you asked if it was illogical. I gave the reason, and then you had a problem with it. But it was like, well, I don't know why you would call in to see if we thought it was illogical. I'm going to give you the answer to it.